right. You're listening to Light in the Dark. We had a bit of a problem there, but we're back on air, so you're definitely listening to A Light in the Dark on Faith FM, and I'm John Weeks. And in the studio we got also Peter Watts as well. And Peter, welcome to the show. And
thank you, John. It's great to be here once again.
Yes. Sometimes we have these little technical problems.
These things happen.
Some people say gremlins. I don't like that word, but that's what they say. Now, we're broadcasting, by the way, in Ringwood, Melbourne time, 11 o'clock. And it's June 16, is it? June
12th.
12th today. So we're in the studio for the next 50 minutes, and we're going to have a great topic. What's the topic there, Peter?
So today we're actually going to talk about shadows, not Cliff Richard and the Shadows.
I never thought of that.
You've got to be pretty old to remember that one, I would imagine.
I do.
But no, we're talking about shadows, and the question we want to ask today is, should we keep the feasts? From time to time, John, I've come across Christians who believe that we should be keeping the feasts, the Jewish feasts. When we call them Jewish feasts, they were given through God to Moses for the children of Israel back in the time when he received the Ten Commandments and other things.
And it's in the Torah.
Yes, absolutely. It's in the Bible.
That's right.
It's in the Bible. So we're going to pick up on that, and we want to ask the question, should we as Christians keep the feasts? And what we're actually going to do, John, is we're going to ask that question today, and then next week we're going to explore a little bit about what can the feasts teach us? And what is our appropriate response to them, and what can we learn from them, particularly can we learn anything about Jesus from the feasts? And that's really what we want to do. But today it's more about shadows. Should we keep the feasts? And for people who are listening, if you want to grab your Bible, you might want to grab a pen and paper or pencil and paper. Sometimes I find when I'm listening to podcasts or I'm listening to radio, John, sometimes I need to, that's an interesting point, and I'll scribble that down, try and remember some of the things from the program or look them up later.
Yeah. I always have a notepad next to my radio or next to my computer.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I'm listening to things.
Yeah. And so if you want to do that, grab that now, and we're going to begin a conversation about, should we keep the feast? Should Christians today keep the feasts? And, I suppose there are extremes on all sides with this one. You can go to two extremes. Some people will say, well, the whole of the Old Testament, you can sort of leave that behind. And there are many Christians who will say, well, I'm a New Testament Christian, or I'm a New Covenant Christian, and that's fine. But sometimes even the description of the Old and New Testament aren't always helpful, because there's really a First Testament and a Second Testament. The idea that there's an Old Testament, out with the old, in with the new, and sometimes we're tempted to just jettison the Old Testament. But the New Testament is written from the perspective of the idea that you've already read the Old Testament. So when you read the New Testament, you can pick it up in Matthew very early on. The first pages of Matthew, it's very clear that Matthew is writing to an audience who's already read the Old Testament. And so we don't want to jettison the entire Old Testament. But are there some things that God has given in the Bible that were for a period and a time, or are they to be continually practiced at all time? And I suppose I would like to lead in to this conversation of shadows and should we keep the feasts with the question, when was the last time you went to church and sacrificed an animal? That's one of the questions I would want to ask people who've listening to this, John. They may be people who've been to a church once in a while. There may be people who've never been to church. There might be people who regularly attend church. I've been in all of those scenarios. I grew up as an atheist and a non-believer, so going to church was as foreign to me as going to the mosque. It was just not something that I was planning to do anytime soon, and I rode a bicycle as a child, and I never, went to the petrol station on my bicycle because I didn't need the petrol.
That's it.
So I didn't go to the mosque and I didn't go to the church. And then, of course, occasionally you would go to church when there was a funeral. I remember when I was in my very early 20s or teens when there were a few significant funerals in our family. And we had 3 of them, I think, in the 12-month period where an aunt had passed away and 2 of my grandparents passed away. Mm. And so I was in church for those funerals. And then, of course, later on I became a believer and became a regular churchgoer. But what I'm saying here in regards to the feasts is that, when we go to church, we do not typically see the sacrifice of animals. Mm. And when you say that out loud in the 21st century context, you say, well, of course not. But it is interesting to understand as we read the stories of the Old Testament, as we read particularly the children of Israel coming out of Egypt and establishing the sanctuary and its services, and then establishing a kind of religious year where they would have various feasts throughout that year as a continual sort of calendar. That animal sacrifice was central to that whole system. And it's very foreign to us. Even today, I don't know, whether people listening are meat eaters or vegetarians or vegans or whatever they are. But when we go to the supermarket and we buy our meat, we very rarely see the meat butchered. We very rarely see the meat killed. It wouldn't be sacrificed, it would be killed. But, most of us wouldn't visit an abattoir. No. And probably wouldn't want to. But the reality is that we've kind of been insulated, I think, John, I was a meat eater myself. I've been a vegetarian for much of the last 30 years. I've eaten meat occasionally. So I've been a meat eater, I've been a vegetarian, and that's not really the point. The point is that even for those of us who do eat meat, we've been sort of separated from the process of the killing of the animal. So when we buy our KFC or our nuggets or, when you buy your joint of meat at the supermarket, it's far removed from the actual execution of the animal. Which was not the case in the Old Testament. We're going to have a look at that when we come back after the break, and we're going to take a look at these feasts and what was God's intention and should we keep the feasts, John?
Indeed. You're listening to A Light in the Dark on Faith FM, and the topic is Shadows, Should We Keep the Feast? And Peter Watson, I'm John Weeks. Good to have your company. And we're going to have some music now. And the track is by Randy Travis, and We Fall Down.
Fall down, we lay our crowns at the feet of Jesus. The greatness of the mercy and love at the feet of Jesus. And we cry, holy, holy, holy. We cry, holy. Cry, holy, holy, holy is the Lamb. of Jesus, the greatness of the mercy and love at the feet of Jesus, and we cry, holy, 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 and we cry, holy, 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 and we cry, holy, holy, holy is the Lamb, and we cry, holy, 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 we cry, holy, 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 we cry, holy, holy, holy is the Lamb.
You're listening to Faith FM, the program A Light in the Dark, and the topic is shadows. Should we keep the feasts? Before we get into the topic, Peter, I'd like to mention the text line because
Absolutely.
we'd love to get your response on this topic. Now, the text line here in the studio, and I've got the text application already opened up to receive text messages, and you may have a comment, a question, whatever. The text number is 0488 880 831. Again, that number 0488 880 831. So anything that we talk about, any topic, any scripture, whatever, and you're not quite sure.
I got a question they could answer.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask them, do you have in your family or maybe in your community anniversaries that you keep that maybe other families or communities don't keep? And you keep them for a particular reason, you're remembering something, because each of the feasts that we're going to talk about, John, were, an anniversary that we keep each year. And, so are there things in your family where you remember an anniversary of something in particular that might be a little unusual
To others.
particular to your family?
Yeah.
So I'll be interested in that.
Yeah. So again, that number very quickly, 0488 880 831. I'll keep a check on the text messages
sure.
come through, and we'll share them on radio.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's dive back in. We're looking at shadows. Should we keep the feasts? In the Bible, there are a number of feasts. We're going to dive into this, John, in Leviticus 23. And there are 7 annual feasts that were initially given by God through Moses to the children of Israel for them to keep throughout the year. And there were really 4 spring feasts and then 3 autumn feasts. And we read about them in Leviticus 23. And we're going to pick this up in Leviticus 23. I'm going to get you to read, John. We're going to read verses 4 through 8.
Okay.
And it begins with Passover.
Okay, these are the feasts of the Lord, holy convocations,
Yep.
which you shall proclaim at their appointed times. On the 14th day of the first month at twilight is the Lord's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread to the Lord. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. And on the first day you shall have holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it, and you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord for 7 days. The 7th day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it.
All right. So there's a lot of instruction there. Holy convocation, that's a holy gathering. We talk about a convention where people come together. So a holy convocation is a gathering. These are the feasts, the Bible says. Now, I was talking to you off air, John. If we were, let's for a moment, we'll take away all of the religious connotations of this. And if I was to say to you, this coming weekend at my house, we're having a feast. Come on over, John. We'd love for you to come. What are you expecting to happen there?
A feast, food.
Food, that's it. It's a gathering of people. A feast would be, I mean, if you had one bowl of something, that's a meal, but not necessarily a feast.
No.
But a feast would imply lots of food and many people.
And variety.
And variety.
Yep.
But the idea is food. And so when we talk about the feasts, that was central. They were gathering together and they were going to eat together. It was something that they would look forward to. These were, a little bit like in the Western context, we gather together for Christmas. We might gather together for Easter time. These have been sort of traditions in the Christian calendar for a long time. And this is the kind of thing that it would be for them. You notice there, John, it says in verse 5, on the 14th day of the first month. So the Jews would have they had their own calendar. And we see a little bit of this. I understand that Christmas in the Russian Orthodox calendar is different to Christmas in the Western calendar.
Okay.
Sometimes you'll hear about the Chinese New Year, which is different to our New Year.
Indeed.
And so there are still people around the world who have a different calendar. And certainly this was the case, 2,000 years ago and more, where different communities, different countries would have their own calendar. And the Jewish calendar would start around March time. That would be the first month for their calendar. And so the 14th day of the month, that was to be the time they would remember Passover. Yeah. Now, of course, Passover goes back to the time when God delivered the children of Israel under the leadership of Moses from Egypt as they left Egypt and into the wilderness. And that was done under 10 plagues, which we've talked about on this program before. And the last of those plagues was the death of the firstborn, and they were to sacrifice a lamb. And if they sacrificed a lamb and they put the blood on the doorpost, the angel would pass over.
That's where the name came.
And that's where Passover comes from. Some people don't realise what is Passover. Passover is literally the angel passing over and sparing the lives of those who were under the blood of the Lamb. And, of course, this still has great significance because as Christians, we want to be under the blood of the Lamb, Jesus. And so we recognise that though we are sinners, our lives are spared if we're under the blood of the Lamb. Because the idea is that the Lamb has died. The blood is the evidence of that. And the Lamb has paid the price for my sin.
Yes.
That's the understanding that we have of the Passover lamb. Yep. And we'll come back to that in a moment. So here we have the first two of these 7 feasts, if you like, Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But I want you to notice in verse 8 there, John, it says, "But you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord." Well, that would have been a burnt offering. We know for sure that they sacrificed lambs on Passover because there's significant instruction of that in Exodus as well, that you will keep this feast every year. You're going to remind people what happened. It was important for them to remember that they were delivered by God, by the blood of the Lamb. And then, of course, the question is, in the Christian context, should we still be keeping that, John? Should we still keep the Passover? Well, most people perhaps know, and if they don't, we're sharing that today, is that the Feast of Passover takes place in the spring, and it's around the same time as Easter. Now, they're calculated at different times, and there are different reasons for that, but essentially when Jesus died on the cross, he became our Passover lamb.
Indeed.
And the Bible's quite clear about that. We'll read some scriptures about that shortly. So there are several things I want to point out here. Number one, a feast implies food. The centerpiece of all of that food would have been the sacrificial animal. And people would have eaten that animal. That was the idea with the Passover lamb. They were not only to take some of its blood and put it on the doorposts, but they were to roast the lamb in fire and they were to eat the lamb as a household. And that was something that they would continually commemorate each year. So when I asked the question earlier, John, that, when you go to church, if you've ever been to a church, when was the last time you saw an animal sacrifice at church?
Well, I haven't seen it in the
I think
last
there'd be
13
uproar.
years. Yes.
I think in the Western world, in the Western world, there'd be uproar if you went to church and they were sacrificing an animal at the front there. People would be shocked.
Yep.
And rightly so. But this was commonplace in the sacrificial system of the Israelites, and it all pointed forward to that blood sacrifice, which was the Lord Jesus Christ, who died 2,000 years ago on a cross to pay the price for the sins of you and I, John, and everyone listening to this broadcast. And so all of those blood sacrifices that we find ordained by God, they all pointed to the one sacrifice, Jesus, who was going to die in our place. And so that's important to know as we look at the feasts. We're going to pick up a few more verses through here in our next segment. I believe we're going to go to another song. But before we do, just to reiterate, all of the blood sacrifices that God initiated for the children of Israel were to point to Jesus, our blood sacrifice, who died for us.
And it's very, very strong in the Bible and God's Word to do that. You're listening to Faith FM, of course, and A Light in the Dark, Peter Watts with his topic, Shadows, Should We Keep the Feast? I'm John Weeks. And the next track is by a group called Statement, and it's a track that's very appropriate. It's called Come and Dine. So let's hear this track now. You're listening through him.
Jesus has a table spread where the saints of God are fed. He invites his chosen people, come and dine. With his manna he doth feed and supplies our every need. Oh, 'tis sweet to sup with Jesus all the time. Come and dine, the Master called it, come and dine. You may feast at Jesus' table all the time. Command, for the Master called to them, come and dine. There they found their heart's desire, bread and fish upon the fire. Thus he satisfies the hungry every time. Come and dine, the Master called it, come and dine. You may feast at Jesus' table all the time. He who fed the multitude, turn the water into wine. To the hungry call it now, come and dine. Soon the Lamb will take his bride to be ever at his side. All the host of heaven will assemble be. Oh, 'twill be a glorious sight. All the saints in spotless white, and with Jesus they will feast eternally. Come and dine, the Master called it, come and dine. You may feast at Jesus' table all the time. He who fed the multitude, turn the water into wine. To the hungry call it now, come and dine. He who fed the multitude, turn the water into wine. To the hungry call it now, come and dine.
A bit of bluegrass music there, and from a group called Statement. Got a couple of text messages here. Firstly, I'll get Peter Watts to explain this situation. Hi, John and Peter. Is Brad okay? 'Cause not heard him on Light FM.
Let's answer that one for it.
Yeah.
First of all, dear Brad, I'm hoping he's okay. I think we talked to him earlier today, so I think he's okay.
Yep.
But yes, so Brad moved. He moved state, and so therefore he's not in the studio with us. He's still doing a lot of production work. He's did a lot of other work for 3ABN, but he's not on the Light in the Dark program. And I have to say, I do miss Brad, but I'm blessed to have John instead. And so John is our new co-host and producer on the Light of the Dark show. So Brad is safe and well, but he's just not here.
Yep. So I've been on radio for 29 years. So
Absolutely.
Now another question was, it's just in reference to the question: do families keep
Anniversaries,
etc.? Got a message here. I keep remembrance when I joined SGA, 8th of May 2021. My professional faith, 12th of March 2022, and my son Christopher's professional faith, 6th of 2024.
That's from David in WA.
WA, yes.
Yeah. So thank you very much, David, for that contribution. Anybody else who may have things, comments, questions?
I've got a big one here. I don't know if we can cover this. We may cover it in the next section.
We'll read it out a little later. But
So
please keep sending them in because it's good to hear from you.
Yep.
All right, let's dive back into, so we were asking the question, Shadows, should we keep the feasts? And we talked about the fact that the animal sacrifice, was central to the keeping of these feasts. We talked about the feast implies food. The centerpiece of that food was the sacrifice. People would not only sacrifice, but they would eat. And that's why we're asking, last time you went to church, did you see an animal sacrifice? Well, no is probably the answer. And that is because those sacrifices pointed to Jesus. And we'll just point out a few verses here, John. If you would like to read verse 12 of Leviticus 23.
Sure. And you shall offer on that day when you wave the sheaf a male lamb of the first year without blemish as a burnt offering to the Lord.
All right. So there, again, that's an animal sacrifice associated with the Feast of First Fruits there. Look at verses 18 and 19, John.
Yep. And you shall offer with bread 7 lambs of the first year without blemish, 1 young bull and 2 rams.
All right, let's hold it there. Clearly there's animal sacrifice going on there.
Indeed, yep.
Jump down to verse 25.
No, 19.
No, 25.
25, okay. You shall do no customary work on it, and you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord.
All right, this is another burnt offering.
Yep.
And so, and again, we have it in, we don't have to read all of these. We have it in verse 27, we have it in verse 36, we have it in verse 41. My point would be, for someone who would say, yes, we should be keeping the feasts, I would say then you must be sacrificing the animals, which of course, then in a New Testament context, doesn't make sense from the perspective that Jesus came to be that sacrifice. Now, if people are saying, should we remember the feasts, John? That's another question. And we're actually going to explore that in the next few weeks as to what can we learn from the feasts? Okay. What benefit do they have? Or do we cast them off with the rest of the Old Testament and say they're no longer relevant? Or can they teach us something? And so I think they still can teach us some things. But I don't believe that we keep the feasts. And I think the reasons for that are self-evident. If we look at, for instance, let's look at Daniel 9:27. I know I'm jumping around a bit, John. Just try to keep you on the toes there, John.
Oh, you could definitely do it. Daniel 27. Yep.
9:27.
Oh, 9:27.
Yeah,
okay,
Daniel 9:27.
Yep, okay.
There is a prophecy in Daniel 9 that's quite amazing, and it's about the prediction of the coming Messiah, and it talks about what the Messiah will accomplish as well. And I just want you to read in verse 27, just to read the first couple of sentences there.
Sure. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week. And he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering.
All right. So it says here, in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. This is talking about the Messiah when he would come. He would confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. And in the middle of that week, that final week of the prophecy that we won't go into now, but we've covered in previous episodes, take a look at there's a series on Faith FM called Daniel and the God of Wisdom. You'll find an episode there on Daniel chapter 9. And that'll cover this prophecy. But it's talking about the Messiah. He'll confirm a covenant with many. We remember Jesus at the Last Supper said, "This is my blood of the new covenant." And then it says, in Mr. Week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And this is why, John, when we go to church today, whether it be for a wedding or a funeral or a baptism or a regular church service on the weekend, we go to church and we do not see animal sacrifices.
Thankfully.
We find that Jesus himself is the sacrifice to which they all pointed. And as such, then, we no longer have to sacrifice animals. So now we're going to go to the New Testament, and we're going to go to that verse, Colossians, that I planned to look at earlier. Mm-hmm. Colossians chapter 2, we're going to look at verses 13 through 17. And I'm going to get you to read that, John, because here Paul is writing to the church at Colossae. Funnily enough, I got a picture from a friend about 3 days ago. He's in Colossae. He's on a Bible Lands tour.
Oh, how good is that?
Yeah, he's visiting there's a tell there, like a settlement hill.
Yep.
And it's all rubble there. There's, hardly a lot of wheat growing there or whatever.
Very ancient site.
Yeah, I've been to Colossae, and he sent me a picture back. So anyway, we're at Colossians. Paul is writing to the church at Colossae, and let's pick it up, Colossians 2:13 through 17.
Okay. And you being dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he has made alive together with him, having forgiven all your trespasses, having wiped out the handwriting of requirements that was against us, which was contrary to us, and he has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross. Having disarmed principalities and powers, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them in it. And so let no one judge you in food or in drink or regarding a festival or a new moon or Sabbaths, which are a shadow. This is where the word comes from, shadow of things to come, but the substance is of Christ.
Thank you so much, John, for reading that. So here he talks about the fact that there was the handwriting of requirements that was against us, and he take it out of the way, nailed it to the cross. Well, what was nailed to the cross, John? Jesus was nailed to the cross, but I believe our record of sins was nailed to the cross. Jesus took that with him. He took that upon him. Mm-hmm. All our iniquities were laid on him, and he went to the cross and died for our sins. And so then you come to Colossians 2:16, and he says, let no one judge you in food or in drink or regarding a festival or new moon or Sabbaths. 5 things there, John. And sometimes people will pick up on that word Sabbaths and say, see, we no longer have to keep the Sabbath.
Yes.
And we're talking about there the 7th day Sabbath of the 10 Commandments, the day we typically call Saturday each week. It's in the 10 Commandments. People say, oh, this means that we don't need to keep Sabbaths. What we need to understand, John, is these feasts that we've been talking about in Leviticus 23, those feasts, those holy days, they were called rest days or Sabbaths in the plural. Not to be distinguished from the 7th day Sabbath, which comes every week, every 7th day. But these were festivals and feasts through the year. And now, how do I know that that's the way this should be interpreted? Am I trying to wiggle out of a difficult text here? Well, no. If you think about it, look at the 5 things that he mentions in Colossians 2:16. He says, let no one judge you in food, in drink, regarding a festival, new moon, or Sabbaths. Okay? So here's my question. When we talk about the 10 Commandments, is there a mention of food there?
No.
There's no food in the 10 Commandments.
Not at all.
What about drink? offerings? Is there anything to do with drink in the Ten Commandments?
No.
Nothing in there.
No.
What about festivals? Doesn't talk about the feasts or the festivals in the Ten Commandments. What about new moon? Is the new moon mentioned in the Ten Commandments?
None whatsoever.
It's not. So therefore, when we come to this word Sabbaths, are we saying, well, that's got to be the one from the Ten Commandments, when in actual fact the other 4 items are not mentioned in the Ten Commandments? And it says here in verse 17, which are a shadow of the things to come, but the substance is of Christ. And that's where we get our show title, Shadows, Should We Keep the Feast? So I want to pick up on this, John. These 5 items are mentioned together, all 5 items, in the same order in Ezekiel 45 and verse 17. And this is why we're going to jump to that, because we want to identify these Sabbaths. So we're talking about the seventh-day Sabbath, or we're talking about the feast Sabbaths.
Okay.
And I'm going to demonstrate that it's the feast Sabbaths.
Okay. I'll read it.
Yeah, let's look at Ezekiel. Let me get there, John,
45:17.
because I'm a little bit slower than you.
So
Go for it, John. Go for it. 45:17.
Okay. And then it shall be the prince's part to give burnt offerings. That's one. Grain offerings and drink offerings at the feasts, the new moons, the Sabbaths, and at all the appointed seasons of the house of Israel. He shall prepare the sin offering, the grain offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offerings to make atonement for the house of Israel.
All right. Thank you so much. So here you have in this passage all of those items mentioned in Colossians. All 5 of them are there. They're in the same order as they are in Colossians. Yeah. And clearly this is about the reestablishment of the sanctuary and temple rituals after the Babylonian captivity.
Okay.
Ezekiel was a prophet of God who was taken captive to Babylon, a bit like Daniel, but he was taken a little later. And here in the late part of Ezekiel, he is receiving a vision of an ideal kind of temple.
Okay.
Okay, and there's going to be a restoration of the temple, because when the children of Israel, when God's, the Jews who are in Babylon, and Ezekiel's there with them, God is going to arrange for them to go back to Jerusalem, rebuild the temple, and that is exactly what they did. And this is some 500 years before Christ.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, some 500 years. So when they're saying, oh, yes, they're reinstituting these feasts, yes, because this is 500 years before Christ, they're still pointing forward to Jesus.
That's right.
And so what we see here is we clearly have animal offerings going on here in this idea of a reconstituted temple, 500 years before Jesus. And so that's what this is talking about. We'll come back after the break.
We will indeed. Listening to A Light in the Dark on Faith FM.
He came home from work last night to find that she's gone. Now he's spending his first Sunday sitting in the pew alone. There are whispers all around him, his heart breaks in two. He's wondering who will reach out and help him make it through. Who will be Jesus to him? Who'll show the love that restores him again? He doesn't need a judge, he needs a friend. Who will be Jesus to him? Like the woman at the well, the only love she ever knew was the kind she buys and sells. But her thirsty heart is searching for a love that will be true. The Savior cries for her to see himself in me and you. Who will be Jesus to her? Who'll show the love that's commanded in his word? Will she see in us the mighty God we serve? Who will be Jesus to her? when they look at us, do they see Jesus there? Who will be Jesus to them? Who will show the love that restores them again? They do not need a judge, they need a friend. Who will be Jesus to them? Who will be Jesus to them?
A good track there from the Forbes family, Who Will Be Jesus. You're listening to A Light in the Dark on Faith FM. And the text line, just to mention it again, the text line is 0488880831. We also have a book offering, which we'll explain what it's all about in the next quarter. But it's the book called Last Day Advents. It's a paperback by Alan G. White, and I'll explain what that is in the fourth quarter of the show. We're getting text messages. Thank you so much for all that. And I'm just going to pick one. This is quite a long one here, but really appreciate the response here. But we'll deal with starting from the top, please. Okay, we're talking about Leviticus 23. The Sabbath is mentioned with the rest of God's holy convocations.
Yes,
okay. These were there were also twice as many sacrifices on the Sabbath day, the texter says. So why do you choose to keep the seventh-day Sabbath, is the question the texter is asking.
Excellent question, and thank you so much for sending it in. We value so much the interaction with the listeners. So let me read that. Leviticus 23, verse 3. It says... it's introducing all the feasts, and then it says, 6 days you shall work be done, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You should do no work on it. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. So that is listed there for sure. But then when you read verse 4, it says, these are the feasts of the Lord, and then it lists those 7 feasts. So people ask, honestly, isn't the Sabbath, one of the feasts? The question is, why do you keep the Sabbath but not the other feasts? And the answer to that really is because it's a part of God's 10 Commandments. There are several answers to that question. First of all, the seventh-day Sabbath is a memorial to creation. It was given before sin. There was no sin in the world. There had been no fall. It was a reminder that God is our creator. And that's still true today. Furthermore, of course, it's then put in the 10 Commandments. None of the feasts were put in the 10 Commandments. We just demonstrated that a few moments ago. We note, by the way, that the 10 Commandments, God said, build this golden box called the Ark of the Covenant to put the 10 Commandments in. But the book, with all of the feasts and other ritual regulations for Israel, was put in a book beside the Ark. So God makes the distinction between the seventh-day Sabbath and the feasts. The seventh-day Sabbath was in the 10 Commandments. The feasts aren't. The 10 Commandments were put inside the Ark. The book of regulations and rituals were put outside the Ark. Jesus kept the Sabbath, and he says, if you love me, keep my commandments. We're going to read some more verses shortly, John, that indicate this also. So God, I believe, is the one who makes a distinction between the seventh-day Sabbath, which, by the way, pre-existed all the other feasts. These feasts were given at the time of Leviticus, but the seventh-day Sabbath you can trace all the way back to Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 to 3.
Okay.
So that would be the answer to that question.
Okay. What about, and this is a question I hear, and it's also the text here says, yeah, but Christians celebrate Easter and they celebrate Christmas.
Yes. Okay, good question.
What's your take on that?
So first of all, this may come as a shock to people if they believe in Santa Claus. But
you mean he's not real?
But December 25, John, is not a biblical date. It's not a holy date. There's nothing in the Bible that says December 25 should be kept as a holy day. And so I don't believe that. So when people say, do you keep Christmas and something? However, what I would say is this. The birth of Jesus is a holy event, right? The date, 25th of December, is not a holy day, but the birth of Jesus is a holy event. We don't know exactly when Jesus was born. I don't have a problem with celebrating the birth of Jesus because I do believe that was a holy event, and the angels rejoiced, the wise men rejoiced, the shepherds rejoiced. So I think we can rejoice at the birth of Jesus. but we don't know precisely when that is. No. So I don't have a problem celebrating the birth of Jesus. I would just say that the 25th of December is not a holy day, and it's not listed in the Bible. The same would be true with Easter, inasmuch as Jesus died at the Passover time. We know that. And Easter is generally around that time. The Christian church has sort of established a time on a different basis to the Jews in terms of calendar-wise. That's why sometimes Passover falls at the same time as Easter, and sometimes it doesn't. Yep. So there's no requirement in the Bible to celebrate Easter as such. However, once again, I would say if we're talking about the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, absolutely I want to remember that. I never want to forget what Jesus did for me and what he did for you and what he did for the whole world. So that's the way I would address that, John.
Okay. We move on to the topic, but the text, it was quite a long text, so he didn't give a name. That's fine.
That's fine.
I'll give you, Peter, a whole text, and you can maybe look at it and address it maybe next week if you want to. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to some other verses, which I think probably will help us in answering that too. So let's go to Hebrews, for instance. Hebrews
9?
Hebrews 9:28.
Okay.
I want you to read that for us, John.
Sure.
Once I get there, I just like to read. Here we go.
You've got to keep up with
Go
me
for
here.
it.
Okay, so Christ was offered once to bear the sins of many. To those who eagerly wait for him, he will appear a second time, apart from sin, for salvation.
All right. So here it's telling us as Christ was offered once to bear the sins of many. So in other words, rather than sacrificing at the feasts all through the year, or even sacrificing a lamb every year at Passover, we are remembering Jesus died once for the sins of many. So all of those other blood sacrifices were pointing to Jesus. And when he came, there's no more a need for sacrifice for sin because Jesus is the sacrifice. So that's the point we wanted to make there. There's another verse in 1 Corinthians, chapter 5 and verse 7. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7, if you'd like to read that one out, John.
Oh, right. Okay, well, hang on 1 second.
That's all right. 1 Corinthians 5, 7.
Here am I stirring you up. So
Can't you keep up, John?
No,
Sure.
no, that's right.
No, my fault.
No, that's fine.
1 Corinthians 5 and verse 7.
I got it here. Okay. Therefore, purge out of the old leaven, that you may be a new lump. That's an interesting term. Since you truly are unleavened. For indeed Christ, our Passover, was sacrificed for us.
All right. So here it's using leaven as a symbol of sin. Okay. In the Old Testament, one of the things that they did on the Feast of Unleavened Bread is they would remove all leaven from the house. Yep. And the idea was that leaven was a symbol of sin. And it says, purge out the old leaven that you may be a new lump. Probably don't like being called a lump, John.
No.
But the idea is that you are a lump without leaven, since you are truly unleavened, it says. But it says, for indeed Christ our Passover was sacrificed for us. This is the point of those sacrificial animals. They pointed to Jesus, but he is the fulfillment of it. And we've read that a few times in different ways now. We're just going to hop over a couple of chapters, John, to 1 Corinthians 7. And verse 19, because there's an interesting thing here Paul writes. And we have a few minutes. So
yes, of course we do. Okay, verse 19. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing, but keeping the commandments of God is what matters.
All right. So here, what we have to understand is Paul, in many of his writings, and Paul wrote just about half the New Testament books anyway, when he writes, he's writing to a church that is made up of Jewish believers and Gentile believers. And one of the questions he's constantly dealing with is, how Jewish do you have to be a Christian? And it's something Paul faced himself, because he was raised a Jew. He was a very zealous Jew, and then he became a Christian. And so he's dealing with a Christian church now where there are Jews becoming Christians, there are Gentiles becoming Christians, they're in the house together. How are they going to get along? do you have to be Jewish? Do you have to be circumcised? All of these different things. And so Paul is saying here, circumcision is nothing and uncircumcision is nothing, but keeping the commandments of God is what matters. And here again is another distinction. Our friend who wrote in the question, thank you very much for writing in the question, why do we keep the Sabbath but not the festivals? This is another example. Circumcision was a male blood sacrifice. And again, it pointed to Jesus, the male blood sacrifice. And so when Jesus came, we no longer have to be circumcised. Some people still do circumcise.
Yes, I've seen it in the Philippines.
It's not required of the New Testament to be circumcised to be a Christian. And they're saying these male blood sacrifices came to an end of the cross. Circumcision is nothing. Uncircumcision is nothing. But keeping the commandments of God is what matters. And one of the reasons we keep the seventh-day Sabbath, John, is because it's at the heart of the Ten Commandments. And Jesus kept it. He said, if you love me, keep my commandments. So that's what we want to do. Here's one more, and this is going to be our last passage. I want to go to Hebrews chapter 10, and we're going to read verses 1 to 4, John.
Okay.
Would you like to read that out?
Yep. For the law, having a shadow of the good things to come, and not the very image of the things, can never, with these same sacrifices, which they offer continually year by year, make those who approach perfect. For then would they not have ceased to be offered? For the worshippers, once purified, would have had no more consciousness of sins. But in those sacrifices there is a reminder of sins every year. For it is not possible that the blood of bulls and goats could take away sins.
All right. So here again, thank you, John, for reading that. Here again in Hebrews 10:1, it says, for the law having a shadow of the good things to come. He's talking about the ceremonial law here. The law of sacrifices and offerings. That's very clear in verse 4, where it says it's not possible for the bloods of bulls and goats. He's not talking about the Ten Commandments here.
No.
There's no bulls and goats in the Ten Commandments.
None whatsoever.
And Paul has made that point, as we've seen in Corinthians, about the difference between the ceremonies that came to an end and the moral law, the Ten Commandments, which remain. And so Jesus is our Passover, Jesus is our sacrifice, and here it mentions that they are shadows, a shadow of the good things to come. And so that's why we've talked about today our subject being shadows, should we keep the feasts. So we don't believe that we should keep the feasts, but I think there is value in understanding what the feasts point to, John. And next week, we're going to continue this series under the heading Shadows, and we're going to take a look at Passover. We're going to take a look at what happened there, what Jesus did, and how that is helpful to us, and understanding what the purpose of that feast was, what it pointed to, and how Jesus fulfills the feasts in his ministry.
Indeed.
And that's what we're going to look at.
Okay, now very quickly, we got a book offer.
Yeah.
A book offering. It's The Last Day Events by Alan G. White. If you would like to have this copy of the book, you can text us on 0488 880 831. That's again the number 0488 880 831. Put in the text, this is what you're going to need to do, put ALD 63. And by doing that, our team will get back to you and explain how we get the book out to you. So it's a great book, actually, I must admit. So that's pretty much, actually, we got a bit, I can mention about the book. One of the most central themes of the gospel and the most precious hope of believers is Jesus' promise to return. And the book covers those sort of things. So,
Yes.
And he's left us clues, he's left us signs that would indicate his second coming is very near.
Yeah.
So ALD 63 in a text message.
All right, terrific. Well, thanks for listening. I hope to see you next week.
Okay. I'm John Weeks, and that was Peter Watson. You're listening to Faith FM, The Light in the Dark on Faith FM. Check it out.